From cave wall hands to the printing press, empires rose in a giant mess. Silk road spice and a compass spin. Humans kept inventing trouble again. A pharaoh blinked and a kingdom fell. Romans built roads and aqueducts well. Mongols rode through half the earth, changing maps for what it's worth. We mapped the stars, crossed every sea, argued on what gods could be. Trade, revolt, philosophy, history's one big conspiracy. It all started with a buffer. Wait! The Buffer History Podcast, where timelines crash and cultures talk back. From Delhi courts to Viking raids to Cold War spies and samurai blades. We got revolutions, treaties, kings, tiny events changing everything. One bad border, one coup, one chart, and suddenly the whole world falls apart. So gather round, don't lose the plot, cause history's way weirder than we were taught. The past ain't dead, it's broadcasting live on Buffer History tonight.
So if we look back at the spring of 2026, the global economy basically just ground to a total halt.
Yeah, completely froze.
Right. And the crazy thing is, the trigger wasn't some massive stock market crash or, a sudden pandemic.
No, not at all.
It was the closure of this tiny 21-mile stretch of water, the Strait of Hormuz.
Just 21 miles wide. Yeah.
Exactly. And suddenly, oil tankers just couldn't move. Insurance premiums for international shipping didn't just spike. They literally ceased to exist.
Right. Nobody would underwrite those voyages.
And global markets just went into an absolute freefall because that waterway shut down. Well, the sky over Tehran was, it was lighting up with hundreds of airstrikes.
Yeah.
While U.S. warships were out there desperately trying to swat thousands of these asymmetric suicide drones right out of the air.
It was the culmination of something that had been building quietly in the background for over 70 years.
Yeah, 7 decades.
Exactly, because we watch these breaking news alerts, right? We see massive conventional bombardments, embassy strikes across the Gulf, naval blockades, and we immediately try to map them onto our standard understanding of war.
Right, we look for the good guys, the bad guys, the clear battle line.
I look for the trenches. But if you try to understand the 2026 war between Iran, Israel, and the United States using a traditional map, you are going to be completely lost.
Totally lost. Welcome to the Buffer History Deep Dive. Today, we are basically dismantling that map.
Tearing it up.
Exactly. Because we want to rewind the clock for you. We need to understand how we actually got to the devastating conflicts of 2025 and 2026.
Because it's not what most people think.
No, it really isn't. The truth is, this is not a story of ancient, intractable religious hatred.
Right.
It's a modern geopolitical thriller. I mean, we're going to look at secret oil pipelines built in the dead of night, AI-controlled machine guns mounted on pickup trucks.
With devastating double crosses.
Devastating double crosses, yeah. And this massive clandestine alliance that both sides desperately want you and the rest of the world to forget ever happened.
And to do that, we are synthesizing decades of intelligence analyses, historical accounts, and strategic doctrines.
We have some incredible material to go through today.
We really do. We'll be looking closely at the mechanisms of covert warfare, detailed in works like Trita Parsi's Treacherous Alliance, and also Ronen Bergman's Rise and Kill First.
2 fascinating deep dives in their own right.
Absolutely, because our mission today is to break down the mechanics, like how do these proxy networks actually operate? What is the physical logistics of an AI-assisted assassination?
Yeah.
And maybe most importantly, why did a decades-long shadow war finally just boil over into open, devastating combat?
But before we get into the tactical weeds here, let's establish our baseline.
Good idea.
Because this deep dive touches on extremely sensitive, ongoing events that impact millions of lives.
Right.
So our approach today is strictly analytical.
Strictly analytical, yes.
We are absolutely not here to endorse any political viewpoints or take a side in this conflict.
Right.
At all.
Right.
We are impartially breaking down the strategies, the historical decisions, and the military tactics documented in the research. So you, the listener, can just grasp the sheer scale and complexity of what is happening on the global chessboard.
And with that framework in place, we really have to start at what I think is the most counterintuitive point in this entire history.
Oh, absolutely.
Because to understand the missiles flying in 2026, you literally have to go back to 1948.
Yeah, going through the historical timelines for this, I actually had to double-check the dates.
I don't blame you.
I was like, wait, am I misunderstanding the geopolitics here? Because when Israel was founded in 1948, the surrounding nations basically immediately declared war.
Right, the Arab-Israeli War.
Right. But under the Pahlavi dynasty, led by the Shah of Iran, Iran actually became the second Muslim-majority country on earth to officially recognize the State of Israel.
Which just sounds wild today.
It sounds totally backwards. They weren't enemies, they were strategic partners.
Well, you really have to look at the pressure cooker of the Middle East in the 1950s to get it.
Set the scene for us.
So Israel is this brand new state entirely surrounded by hostile Arab neighbors who absolutely refuse to acknowledge its right to exist.
They're boxed in.
Entirely boxed in, they are facing an existential blockade. And in Tel Aviv, Israel's first prime minister, David Ben-Gurion, looks at this map and realizes he cannot break the Arab encirclement directly.
He doesn't have the manpower or the geography for it.
Exactly, so he designs a workaround. He formulates what became known as the Periphery Doctrine.
Let's break down the mechanics of the Periphery Doctrine, because honestly, it is a brilliant piece of spatial strategy.
It really is.
If you think about it like a high school survival strategy, if the popular clique hates you, and they've got you cornered, you don't keep banging your head against the wall trying to negotiate with them. You look past them. You immediately go make ironclad alliances with the kids in the neighboring towns to box them in.
Build a larger box around the people trying to box you in.
Exactly.
And that is the architectural logic of it. Ben-Gurion looked to the non-Arab states on the edges of the Middle East.
Who were they?
Specifically, Turkey, Ethiopia, and most importantly, Iran.
Okay, but why Iran?
Well, the reason this pitched so perfectly to the Shah of Iran was that Iran felt equally claustrophobic.
Really?
Yeah. You have to remember, Iran is predominantly Persian. They speak Farsi, which is an Indo-European language, and they practice Shia Islam.
Right.
But the nations surrounding them were predominantly Arab and Sunni.
So they felt like an island.
A total island.
So the Shah is sitting there looking at the rise of Pan-Arabism,
Yep.
which is this massive, sweeping ideological movement led by figures like Egypt's Gamal Abdel Nasser, who basically wanted to unify the Arab world into a single powerful bloc.
Exactly. Nasser was a huge threat to the Shah.
And the Shah realizes that if Nasser succeeds, Iran is going to be completely isolated and totally overwhelmed.
And in Trita Parsi's treacherous alliance, he points out that Iran and Israel actually shared an identical security dilemma at that time.
They were looking at the exact same nightmare scenario.
They both viewed Nasser's regime in Cairo as an existential threat, and they both feared the expanding influence of the Soviet Union just to their north.
So it was just cold, hard pragmatism.
Entirely. They were two non-Arab anomalies in a region that was rapidly radicalizing against Western influence. They simply needed each other.
But they couldn't exactly broadcast this friendship to the world, right?
Definitely not.
I mean, the Shah still had to manage his own domestic population, which was very sympathetic to the Palestinians, and he had to maintain functional relationships with the Arab states.
Right. He had an image to keep up.
So they engaged in this massive clandestine collaboration. And I think my favorite example of this is the physical infrastructure they built together. We have to talk about the Eilat-Ashkelon pipeline.
Oh, the pipeline is the ultimate manifestation of the Periphery Doctrine.
It's mind-boggling.
So in 1956, during the Suez Crisis, Egypt essentially chokes off the Suez Canal.
Right.
Israel suddenly has no way to get oil. Their economy is threatening to collapse entirely.
They're starving for energy.
Meanwhile, Iran has these massive oil reserves, but the Shah is struggling to find secure, reliable export routes that don't rely on navigating through hostile Egyptian-controlled waters.
So they have a mutual problem.
And a mutual solution. The logistics of how they solved this are just staggering. In just 100 days.
Wait, 100 days? That's insane.
100 days. They secretly constructed an enormous oil pipeline.
How does that even work?
Well, they pumped Iranian oil onto tankers, sailed it all the way down to the Israeli port of Eilat on the Red Sea.
Okay.
And then they pumped it directly through the Israeli desert to the Mediterranean port of Ashkelon.
So they basically bypassed Egypt entirely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And from Ashkelon, Israel could use the oil domestically, or they could quietly sell it off to Europe.
That is, I mean, it was a highly lucrative joint venture.
It's extremely lucrative.
But the secrecy involved must have been intense. Like, you can't just hide a massive tanker.
No, but you can disguise it. The tankers shipping the oil would frequently change their registration, or they would sail under flags of convenience just to avoid tipping off Arab intelligence agencies.
Wow.
And the financial side. The transactions were routed through these incredibly complex shell companies in Europe.
Just totally off the books.
It was a multi-million-dollar lifeblood connecting the two nations, operating entirely in the shadows.
And, once you are sharing your lifeblood, you inevitably start sharing your secrets.
That's how it goes.
The intelligence collaboration went incredibly deep. I mean, Israel's intelligence agency, the Mossad, practically helped build Iran's domestic security apparatus from the ground up.
The Savak.
Right, the Savak.
And to understand the Savak, you really have to realize they weren't just, like, beat cops. They were a fiercely powerful, often brutally efficient secret police force. They were designed to root out Soviet sympathizers, communist agitators, and radical Islamic clerics who threatened the Shah's rule.
Right.
And the Mossad provided the training. They trained them in surveillance and interrogation, counter-espionage.
They essentially taught the Iranians how to secure their own state against the internal and external forces that both nations feared.
Exactly. In fact, in Ronen Bergman's Rise and Kill First, he details how this actually evolved into a formal tripartite intelligence alliance.
Tripartite, meaning three parts.
Right. It was codenamed Trident, and it included Turkey as well.
Okay.
We are talking about the daily exchange of massive dossiers on Soviet troop movements and Arab military capacities.
And it didn't just stop at intelligence gathering, right?
No. By 1977, they launched something called Project Flower.
Project Flower.
This wasn't just sharing photos. This was Israel and Iran actively co-developing advanced ground-to-ground ballistic missiles.
See, that is the part that sounds like a spy thriller. Israel and Iran co-developing missiles.
It was a perfect symbiosis, really. The Shah wanted a deterrent against Iraq, which was being heavily armed by the Soviets at the time.
Right.
Israel had the technological edge and the engineering talent, but they lacked the vast testing grounds and, frankly, the funding.
So Iran provided the capital and the desert ranges.
And Israel provided the engineering.
But how do you physically manage that level of coordination without the rest of the world noticing? Like, you have to have diplomats on the ground, right?
You do. And the Iranian government utilized this fascinating strategy of calculated ambivalence.
What does that mean in practice?
Well, publicly, the Shah would occasionally stand up at the United Nations and criticize Israel just to keep up appearances with his Arab neighbors.
Okay, true.
But privately, he was literally inviting Israeli generals to Tehran.
And going through the historical documents on this, there is this detail that sounds like it was scripted for a movie.
Oh, Burn 2.
Yes, Burn 2. Because Iran couldn't have an official embassy in Tel Aviv with, like, a flag flying out front, they created a ghost mission.
Right.
Iranian foreign ministry documents literally referred to their diplomatic outposts in Israel as Burn 2, as in a secondary embassy located in Bern, Switzerland.
The operational security was incredibly strict.
How do they even travel?
When Iranian officials traveled to Israel, they never flew direct. They would always route through Istanbul or Ankara.
So there was no direct paper trail?
None. And when they finally landed in Tel Aviv, Israeli customs agents were under strict instructions never to stamp their passports.
Wow.
They existed in this complete diplomatic phantom zone.
Okay, so structurally, geopolitically, they are a perfect match on paper.
Absolutely.
But there is this fascinating psychological friction here that the sources highlight.
Oh, the cultural clash.
Yes. Even when they were actively cooperating, their fundamental cultural approaches to negotiation and communication were just completely at odds. We really have to look at the clash between Tarof and Chutzpah.
Those two concepts essentially represent the core operating systems of their respective cultures.
Right. And I want to break these down because it explains so much of the miscommunication that plagued their relationship, even when they were friends.
Let's do it.
So, Tarof is this deeply ingrained Iranian cultural practice. It is a system of extreme, layered, and often very insincere politeness meant to establish social hierarchy and show respect.
Right.
Like if you go to a shop in Tehran and try to pay for something, the shopkeeper might literally tell you the item is worthless and you should just take it for free.
But you definitely cannot just take it.
No, you absolutely cannot just take it. You are culturally required to insist on paying multiple times until they finally accept the money. It's this whole dance of nuance and symbolism.
It's very complex. And then you have Chutzpah.
Right, Chutzpah.
Which is the bedrock of Israeli interaction. It translates roughly to extreme audacity or unfiltered directness.
Completely unfiltered.
An Israeli negotiator is generally going to walk into a room, identify the core problem immediately, state their demands without any preamble whatsoever, and basically expect a binary yes or no answer.
So just imagine the intelligence meetings between these two.
It must have been chaotic.
You have an Iranian diplomat speaking in these circles of polite, strategic ambiguity to save face. And sitting across the table is an Israeli Mossad officer banging his fist, demanding a straight answer on missile payload capacities.
It sounds humorous. And it is, but it actually created a dangerous asymmetry in how the entire relationship was perceived.
How so?
Well, in Trita Parsi's analysis, he notes that Israeli officials frequently mistook Iran's practical cooperation for genuine emotional friendship.
They thought they were actually buddies.
Right. The Israelis wanted public acknowledgement, but the Iranians, operating with this total dispassionate pragmatism, they just saw Israel as a highly useful tool.
A means to an end.
Exactly. They differentiated strictly between having an alliance and being friends.
And that pragmatic, cold calculation is the thread we really have to hold on to. Because in 1979, the entire geopolitical board just flips over.
The Islamic Revolution.
Exactly. The Shah is overthrown, the Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini returns from exile, and the Islamic Republic is established.
And the rupture between the two nations is immediate, and it is highly theatrical.
I mean, Khomeini just severs all diplomatic ties with Israel instantly.
Yep.
The Israeli embassy in Tehran, the ghost mission, is gone. The actual building they used is seized and literally handed over to the Palestine Liberation Organization.
It's a huge symbolic gesture.
Israel is officially designated as the Little Satan, operating as the regional arm of America, who is the Great Satan.
And to the outside world, and, certainly to the average news consumer watching this unfold, it looks like a complete paradigm shift driven entirely by religious fanaticism.
It really does.
It looks like Iran simply decided overnight that its primary mission on Earth was the destruction of the Jewish state based on pure theological grounds.
Right. But if we examine the actual behavior of the Islamic Republic behind closed doors during the 1980s, a very different picture emerges from the research.
Very different.
The ideological rhetoric was, to a massive extent, a strategic mask.
Wait, a mask, even under the Ayatollah.
Yeah.
Because the rhetoric was incredibly violent.
The rhetoric was incredibly violent, but the geopolitics were desperate.
The Iran-Iraq War.
Exactly. In 1980, Saddam Hussein invades Iran. The Iran-Iraq War begins, and it is this brutal, grinding, horrific conflict.
Trench warfare, chemical weapons, the works.
And the Iranian military is suddenly cut off from all American supply lines because of the U.S. hostage crisis.
Right, they have no spare parts.
They are fighting for the very survival of their brand new revolution. They need spare parts for their fighter jets. They need anti-tank missiles. Where do they get them?
From the Little Satan.
From the Little Satan. Throughout the 1980s, the Islamic Republic quietly purchased hundreds of millions of dollars worth of arms and munitions from Israel.
It's just wild to think about.
It was the covert pipeline that eventually exploded into the American public consciousness as the Iran-Contra affair.
The logistics of this are just mind-blowing.
Paint the picture for us.
Okay, so the Ayatollah is standing at a podium, publicly calling for the eradication of the Zionist entity, right? He's trying to rally the broader Arab world to his side.
Right, death to Israel.
Meanwhile, his top military commanders are in a back room somewhere, authorizing secret wire transfers to Swiss bank accounts controlled by the Israeli Ministry of Defense.
Just to buy TOW anti-tank missiles.
Exactly. And Israel was highly motivated to supply those weapons.
But why? Why arm the guy calling for your destruction?
Because the logic of the Periphery Doctrine hadn't died.
I see.
Israel looked at the Iran-Iraq War and basically saw two of its greatest enemies bleeding each other dry.
So they wanted to prolong the fight.
Supplying Iran ensured that Iraq, which Israel viewed as the much more immediate conventional military threat at the time, remained totally bogged down in a trench war.
It's pure Machiavellian pragmatism on both sides. And this brings up a concept in the intelligence analysis that I found absolutely fascinating, and we really need to unpack it. It's called simulated irrationality.
It is a brilliant and honestly terrifying diplomatic tool.
It really is. So the idea is that the Iranian leadership deliberately cultivates an image of being fanatical zealots.
I don't want to look crazy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They want the West and Israel to believe that they are religiously motivated martyrs who simply cannot be reasoned with.
Because it's a deterrent.
Right.
Right.
Because if your enemy thinks you're a crazy person holding a grenade with the pin pulled, they're going to give you a very wide berth.
They won't challenge you directly.
It won't. But internally, the regime is actually making these cold, hyper-rational calculations based entirely on state survival.
And the Israeli intelligence community understood this dichotomy perfectly.
They saw right through it.
They did.
Right.
There is this prevalent analytical framework within the Mossad that compares the Iranian leadership to the biblical figure of Queen Esther.
Okay, let's lay out that analogy because it completely reframes how Israel views Iranian strategy.
It's a great comparison.
So Esther was a Persian Jew who married King Xerxes. And she kept her true identity hidden.
Right.
When she discovers a plot by the king's advisor to annihilate her people, she doesn't just run into the throne room screaming for justice. She knows she lacks the direct power to win that confrontation.
She doesn't have the leverage yet.
Exactly. So instead, she uses extreme patience. She hosts a series of banquets. She flatters the king. She carefully maneuvers the advisor into a position of total vulnerability over a long period of time.
She masks her intentions completely.
Completely. Until the exact moment she has maximum leverage, and only then does she strike.
And the sources indicate that Israeli strategists view modern Iran essentially as a nation of Esthers.
Not suicidal maniacs.
Not at all. They view them as master chess players who excel at deception, who know exactly how to mask their true capabilities, and who possess a terrifying amount of patience.
They will wait decades for the geopolitical weather to change in their favor.
And, well, the weather did eventually change.
It did.
The covert trade of the 1980s was a temporary marriage of convenience born out of the Iran-Iraq War, but the entire foundation of their relationship just collapsed in 1991.
Let's look at why 1991 is the hinge point here.
Okay.
Because it's the end of the Cold War. The Soviet Union dissolves. And maybe more importantly for the Middle East, the United States leads Operation Desert Storm and absolutely decimates Saddam Hussein's military apparatus in Iraq.
Right. So for 40 years, Israel and Iran shared those two massive overriding threats, Soviet expansion and a powerful Iraq.
And by 1991?
By 1991, both of those threats are effectively removed from the board entirely.
The buffer is gone.
The buffer is totally gone. Israel and Iran look across the Middle East and they realize they are the only two heavyweight powers left standing.
Wow.
They are no longer partners sharing a common enemy. They are direct competitors fighting for regional hegemony.
And here is the profound irony highlighted by the historians we're drawing from.
What's that?
In the 1990s, the revolutionary zeal inside Iran was actually starting to cool down a bit. The revolution was becoming bureaucratized.
Right, the early fire was fading.
But their practical, physical opposition to Israel skyrocketed.
Because Iran needed a mechanism to project power into the Arab world.
Explain that.
Well, being a Persian Shia nation, they were naturally viewed with deep suspicion by the Arab Sunni majority in the region.
So how do they win them over?
The Palestinian cause provided the perfect wedge. By positioning themselves as the ultimate, uncompromising defender of the Palestinians, Iran could basically bypass the Sunni-Shia divide and win massive popularity on the Arab street.
Which isolates the conservative Arab governments that were aligned with the West.
Exactly. And Israel, of course, countermaneuvered.
What was their play?
Israel launched a massive diplomatic campaign to frame Iran not just as a regional competitor, but as a rogue, apocalyptic state hell-bent on developing nuclear weapons.
They needed to ensure the United States viewed Iran as a global threat that required containment.
Yes. And this is the dawn of the true shadow war.
The era of spies and assassins.
A war fought not with tank battalions, but with proxies, sabotage, and targeted killings. Both sides developed highly specialized playbooks to bleed the other without triggering a full-scale regional conflagration.
I really want to dig into those playbooks, starting with Israel.
Okay.
In Ronen and Bergman's analysis, he tracks the evolution of what is arguably the most sophisticated assassination machine in human history.
The Israeli intelligence doctrine is heavily informed by the trauma of the Holocaust.
It's foundational.
It is the foundational belief of the state, the idea that the Jewish people live under a perpetual threat of annihilation, and when the moment of crisis comes, the international community simply will not intervene.
They believe they are completely on their own.
Therefore, Israel must rely exclusively on preemptive, targeted violence to neutralize threats before they can materialize.
And the doctrine translates to a very simple, terrifying message. If you're an enemy of the state, we will find you, and we will kill you, no matter where you are on the planet.
That's the message.
But, I look at this strategy, and I have to question its ultimate utility.
In what sense?
Like, if you assassinate a top scientist or a militia commander, someone else just gets promoted to fill the vacancy the very next day.
Right.
Isn't this just mowing the grass? How does a targeted hit actually alter the geopolitical math long term?
That is a debate that happens constantly within the highest levels of the Mossad and the IDF.
I'm sure.
But if you look at the strategy championed by Mir Dagan, he was the legendary former director of the Mossad. He viewed targeted killings as just one part of a highly calibrated ecosystem of sabotage.
So it wasn't just random hits?
No. Dagan was tasked with delaying Iran's nuclear program. He didn't believe he could stop it forever, but he firmly believed he could severely retard its progress.
And Dagan implemented this five-pronged approach, right?
Yeah.
He utilized diplomatic isolation, severe economic sanctions, funding for Iranian opposition groups, physical sabotage of the centrifuges.
Like the Stuxnet computer virus, which is a whole other story.
Yeah, Stuxnet. And finally, the fifth prong. The systematic assassination of key nuclear physicists.
And Dagan argued that the assassinations achieved something far more valuable than simply removing technical expertise.
He documented a phenomenon he termed white defection, right?
Yes, white defection.
Let's explain the psychology behind this because it's fascinating.
So imagine you are a brilliant Iranian physicist.
Okay?
You are working on the nuclear program. It's prestigious, you're highly paid, you're respected.
Life is good.
Then your colleague's car explodes on his way to work.
Oh, man.
A few months later, another colleague is shot dead by men on motorcycles in broad daylight.
And suddenly you realize...
You suddenly realize that your own government, despite all of its power, cannot protect you from the Mossad.
The psychological terror of that must be paralyzing. I mean, you are looking over your shoulder every single time you start your ignition.
And that's precisely the point. Dagan observed that under that level of sustained psychological pressure, scientists simply stop innovating.
They freeze up.
They become terrified. They start begging their superiors to be transferred to civilian projects like agricultural research or university teaching.
They defect from the military apparatus, not out of ideological opposition, but out of a sheer desire to survive.
That's white defection.
And the technological evolution of these assassinations, it is terrifying.
It really escalated.
It moved from, magnetic bombs attached to car doors by guys on bikes to something entirely out of a science fiction novel.
The Fakhrizadeh hit.
Yes.
Huh.
We have to talk about the November 2020 assassination of Mohsen Fakhrizadeh.
Fakhrizadeh was the undisputed architect of Iran's military nuclear efforts.
He was the guy.
He was heavily guarded, traveling in bulletproof convoys, and he was highly aware he was Israel's #1 target.
And the details of this operation just show exactly how far Israel was willing to go.
Unbelievable lengths.
The Mossad didn't deploy a team of hitmen to intercept his convoy.
No.
They smuggled a highly advanced automated machine gun into Iran, piece by piece, over several months.
Right.
They reassembled it and mounted it in the bed of a seemingly abandoned Nissan pickup truck. And they just parked it on the side of a road that Fakhrizadeh took to his country house.
And the technological hurdles here are just massive, because the weapon was controlled via satellite by a sniper located over 1,000 miles away.
But think about the physics of that for a second. When you are communicating via satellite, there is a slight delay, a latency of maybe a second or two.
Right, a lag.
If you fire at a moving vehicle based on a delayed video feed, you are going to miss the target entirely.
You'll shoot behind them.
Exactly, which is why the system utilized artificial intelligence.
Right.
The AI software on the gun compensated for the satellite delay, calculated the speed of Fakhrizadeh's vehicle, adjusted for wind, and used facial recognition to ensure it only targeted Fakhrizadeh,
leaving his wife, who was sitting literally inches away from him, unharmed.
The weapon fired a blast of rounds with absolute surgical precision, and the moment the hit was confirmed, the pickup truck was rigged to explode,
destroying the weapon and leaving Iranian investigators with nothing but burning shrapnel.
It is the ultimate flex of technological superiority.
It sends a very clear message.
It tells the Iranian leadership, we have completely penetrated your borders, and we can reach your most protected assets without ever putting a single Israeli boot on the ground.
And that is the Israeli playbook. High-tech, surgical, and deeply psychological.
Right.
Now, we have to examine Iran's counter-strategy, because Tehran knows they cannot match Israel's technological dominance or their American backing in a conventional head-to-head war.
If they try to launch fighter jets against Israel, they will just be swatted out of the sky.
Exactly. So Iran relies entirely on asymmetric warfare.
They utilize what they call the axis of resistance.
And the vanguard of this strategy is the Quds force, which is the elite external operations branch of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps.
And to really understand the Quds force, you have to stop thinking about a traditional army.
Right, they aren't infantry.
They don't deploy battalions across borders. You should think of them more like a combination of the CIA and a highly aggressive venture capitals firm, but specialized in proxy warfare.
That is a highly accurate comparison.
How do they operate on the ground?
Well, the Quds force identifies local grievances across the Middle East. They find Shia populations in Lebanon, Palestinian factions in Gaza, or Houthi rebels in Yemen.
And they offer support?
They provide the seed funding, they smuggle in the weapons, everything from basic assault rifles to advanced ballistic missiles.
They provide the logistical training.
And then they step back and let the local militias execute the violence.
The overarching goal is to build what they call a ring of fire around Israel.
Yes.
Instead of Iran fighting Israel directly, which would obviously risk massive Israeli airstrikes on Tehran, Iran surrounds Israel with these hostile proxies.
Who bleed the Israeli military through 1,000 tiny, agonizing cuts.
Exactly. And the architect of this specific brand of modern asymmetric warfare was a Lebanese commander named Imad Mughniyeh.
A very significant figure.
Operating under the umbrella of Hezbollah and heavily backed by Iranian resources, Mughniyeh fundamentally changed how non-state actors fight conventional armies.
Mughniyeh pioneered the use of devastating mass casualty suicide bombings and highly complex roadside ambushes against the Israeli Defense Forces in southern Lebanon during the 1980s and 90s.
He figured out how to use cheap, readily available explosives to completely paralyze sophisticated Israeli armor columns.
And the strategic brilliance of this, from Tehran's perspective anyway, is the mechanism of plausible deniability.
Plausible deniability.
Israel knows Iran funded the bomb. Israel knows Iran trained the bomber.
Well,
But because no uniformed Iranian soldier ever crossed the border and no official Iranian order can be definitively intercepted, Israel struggles to justify a direct military strike on Iranian soil.
it's like a hacker using a botnet to attack a server.
Great analogy.
You can trace the bot, but tracing it all the way back to the original hacker's keyboard is politically and legally murky.
And for nearly 3 decades, this shadow war basically maintained a grim equilibrium.
A bloody status quo.
Israel utilized its intelligence apparatus to sabotage facilities and assassinate key personnel. Iran utilized its strategic depth to fund proxies and rain rockets on Israeli cities.
Both sides inflicted massive pain.
But both sides carefully calibrated their actions to avoid crossing the threshold into total war.
But the inherent flaw in a shadow war is that it requires both sides to agree to keep the lights off.
Yes, it does.
It requires an incredibly delicate balance. And by late 2024, the intelligence reports showed that the balance fundamentally shattered.
It broke completely.
Israel decided it was time to turn the lights on.
The shift in Israeli strategy was monumental. Following their protracted and devastating campaign against Hamas in Gaza, the Israeli military leadership pivoted their focus northward.
Toward Lebanon.
They concluded that playing defense against the Ring of Fire was simply no longer tenable. They decided to systematically dismantle Iran's proxy shield.
And they went straight for the crown jewel.
Right for the top.
In late 2024, Israel launches a series of unprecedented, overwhelming airstrikes. They don't just hit rocket launchers and fields, they systematically decapitate Hezbollah's entire senior command structure.
They wipe out the leadership of Iran's most capable and heavily armed proxy in a matter of weeks.
And the regional domino effect of that decapitation was immediate.
Huge ripple effects.
Because Hezbollah wasn't just a threat to Israel, they were the physical enforcers for Iranian interests across the entire Levant.
Right.
So without Hezbollah's fighters propping him up, the pro-Iranian Syrian president, Bashar al-Assad, was suddenly highly vulnerable.
And the historical timeline notes that by December 2024, rebel forces led by Ahmed al-Sharaa sweep into Damascus and topple the Assad regime.
Okay, let's analyze the geopolitical math here.
It's grim for Tehran.
In less than 6 months, Iran loses Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah's leadership in Lebanon, and their state-level ally in Syria.
The Ring of Fire is effectively extinguished.
Wait, if Assad falls and Hezbollah is gutted, Iran isn't just losing its ability to project power, they're losing their physical buffer entirely.
Yes.
Doesn't that mean their actual homeland is suddenly completely exposed?
Yes. And it actually gets worse for Tehran. Because in April and October of 2024, there were brief, direct exchanges of fire between Iran and Israel.
Oh, right, the missile exchanges.
And during those exchanges, Israel managed to strike targets deep inside Iranian territory, which exposed severe vulnerabilities in Iran's air defense networks.
So Iran is standing on the global stage without its proxy shield, and everybody can see that its domestic armor is full of holes.
Which sets the conditions for June 2025.
A 12-day war.
The exact moment the shadow war became a conventional conflict.
The accounts of this are brutal. Israel recognizes that Iran is geopolitically naked, so they launch a massive preemptive campaign.
They flood the airspace.
They flood the airspace over Iran, They systematically dismantle what is left of Iran's radar and surface-to-air missile sites,
Blinding them?
and they inflict catastrophic damage on military bases and critical infrastructure.
It was a rapid, high-intensity conflict, and it culminated with direct intervention by the United States.
The U.S. steps in.
Recognizing that the Iranian nuclear program was closer to breakout than ever before, the U.S. deployed heavy Earth-penetrating bunker busters to strike the deeply buried Iranian nuclear enrichment facilities at Fordo and Natanz.
Okay, I have to pause here and challenge the logic of this escalation based on the sources.
Go ahead.
We talked earlier about Mir Dagan, the Mossad chief who designed the assassination program.
Right.
In Ronen Bergman's book, Dagan is on the record vehemently, aggressively warning against a conventional military strike on Iran.
He was totally against it.
He literally called it the stupidest idea he ever heard.
And Dagan's reasoning was purely psychological and political.
What was his argument?
He argued that the Iranian clerical regime was actually deeply unpopular with its own people.
Which was true.
But, he warned, if foreign bombs start falling on Iranian cities, the Iranian populace will instantly rally around the flag.
Nationalism overrides everything.
Exactly. Nationalism will override their hatred of the Ayatollahs. Furthermore, an overt strike would hand the regime the ultimate justification to withdraw from all international treaties,
Kick out the inspectors.
and openly crash-build a nuclear weapon in the name of national defense.
So if the most legendary intelligence chief in Israeli history says an overt strike is a catastrophic mistake, why did the Israeli and American leadership ignore that warning and pull the trigger in 2025?
Because the variables that Dagan based his calculation on had fundamentally changed by then.
How so?
By 2025, the diplomatic avenue was entirely dead. Attempts to resurrect the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal, had failed completely.
There was no talking left to do.
None. Furthermore, the Iranian regime had been weakened by years of crippling economic sanctions and massive internal protests.
So the U.S. and Israel looked at the board and realized Iran's proxies are gone. Their air defenses are compromised. The regime is fighting internal dissent.
And they are weeks away from enriching enough uranium for a bomb.
The window of opportunity to stop them physically was closing rapidly.
So they calculated that the risk of acting was finally lower than the risk of waiting?
And they moved in for the kill.
But the 12-day war in 2025 did not resolve the core conflict.
It really didn't.
It merely set the stage for the absolute nightmare of 2026, Operation Epic Fury.
Let's walk through the mechanics of this escalation because this is where the global economy actually gets dragged into the crossfire.
It is.
February 28, 2026. U.S. and Israeli forces initiate a coordinated, overwhelming strike package against Iran.
And the scale of the bombardment was just unprecedented in modern history.
How big are we talking?
We are talking about nearly 900 individual strikes within just the first 12 hours.
900 strikes.
They targeted command and control bunkers, ballistic missile silos, naval bases, and communication nodes. It was a systematic attempt to totally degrade the Iranian state's capacity to wage war.
But Iran doesn't respond by scrambling their remaining, outdated fighter jets to dogfight with American F-35s.
No, they know that's suicide.
Instead, they activate the doctrine of asymmetric warfare, but this time on a massive regional scale.
And drawing heavily on the framework laid out by security scholar Robert A. Pape, we can see that Iran's counter-strategy was not designed to win a military victory against a superior force.
What were they trying to do?
Their strategy was to widen the arena.
Okay, what does widening the arena actually look like logistically?
It means refusing to fight the enemy where they are strong and attacking them where they are politically and economically vulnerable.
Right.
Iran launched swarms of suicide drones and barrages of ballistic missiles, but they didn't just aim at Tel Aviv or U.S. aircraft carriers.
Where did they aim?
They aimed at U.S. embassies, logistics hubs, and military installations across the entire Arabian Peninsula.
Yeah, the reports show they hit targets in the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, and Jordan.
They are essentially throwing a match into the entire Middle Eastern powder magazine.
And the objective was to transform a localized military campaign into a sprawling, totally unmanageable global crisis.
Yes.
Iran wanted to inflict so much collateral damage, disrupt so much trade, and cause so much panic among America's Arab allies
that the political and economic cost of continuing the war would become unbearable for Washington.
And that strategy peaks with the economic strangulation of April 2026, which brings us right back to the scene we opened with, the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz.
The Strait of Hormuz is the most vital maritime choke point in the global energy market.
Period.
A massive percentage of the world's seaborne oil passes through a channel that, at its narrowest, is only 21 miles wide.
And the actual deepwater shipping lanes are even narrower.
Only 2 miles wide in either direction.
It is incredibly tight. So in April, the U.S. Navy enforces a total blockade to cut off Iran's oil windfalls.
Right.
They physically prevent any tankers that had docked at Iranian terminals from leaving the Gulf. The goal is to starve the Iranian war machine of cash.
But you simply cannot blockade one nation in a channel that narrow without severely impacting everyone else.
The collateral damage is instant.
Commercial shipping companies panic. Insurance syndicates in London refuse to underwrite voyages through the Gulf. Oil prices skyrocket, threatening a major global recession.
And the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Navy doesn't just sit there and let it happen.
No, they escalate.
They deploy fast-attack speedboats armed with heavy machine guns and anti-ship missiles to harass the U.S. blockade. They lay naval mines. They launch drone swarms from the coastline.
Which forces the United States to escalate even further, launching Project Freedom in May 2026.
The logistics of Project Freedom are fascinating and honestly terrifying.
Tell us about it.
The U.S. Navy essentially has to recreate the convoy system from World War II. They group these massive, slow-moving commercial oil tankers together and surround them with heavily armed AGS cruisers and destroyers.
Like floating fortresses.
Exactly. These warships use their phalanx automated gun systems and surface-to-air missiles to swat down Iranian drones while physically escorting the tankers through that 21-mile gauntlet.
It is a war of absolute attrition.
A total grind.
The U.S. and Israel are attempting to physically dismantle Iran's military infrastructure bomb by bomb. And Iran is attempting to exhaust the global economy's tolerance for the war, drone by drone.
And as we sit here looking at the rubble of this conflict, analyzing the blockades and the AI assassinations, it forces a complete recalibration of how we view this part of the world.
It demands that we look past the daily headlines and recognize the deep historical currents driving every single decision.
Because when you watch the news and see an embassy hit or a drone shot down over the Gulf, the media often packages it as a spontaneous eruption of chaos.
Right.
They present the Middle East as a region uniquely prone to irrational, unpredictable violence.
But as we've explored today, absolutely nothing about this conflict is random.
Nothing. Every proxy ambush, every sabotage centrifuge, every pipeline built in secret in the 1950s, it is all part of a highly structured, meticulously calculated geopolitical chess match.
A match that started with David Ben-Gurion drafting the Periphery Doctrine, evolved through the clandestine arms sales of the 1980s, and escalated into the targeted killings and AI snipers of the modern era.
It is a match that directly dictates the price you pay at the gas pump and the fundamental architecture of global security.
And if we step back and look at the totality of this 70-year arc, it leaves us with a deeply provocative thought to consider.
What's that?
Since the 1979 revolution, the leaders in Tehran and Tel Aviv have engaged in the most extreme, demonizing rhetoric possible.
Oh, absolutely.
The Israeli leadership portrays Iran as a suicidal cult of religious fanatics seeking a nuclear holocaust. And the Iranian leadership portrays Israel as an illegitimate, cancerous entity that must be violently excised from the map.
They have constructed their modern national identities around this absolute, uncompromising enmity.
They need each other to be the ultimate villain.
But if you strip away the speeches and look exclusively at their actions.
Exactly. If you look at the secret weapons trades during the Iran-Iraq War, if you look at Iran's careful, calculated use of asymmetric proxies to avoid direct confrontation, if you look at Israel's systematic, patient use of intelligence and sabotage to manage threats without triggering regional wars,
you see that both nations operate with a remarkably similar, cold-blooded geopolitical pragmatism.
They are essentially running the exact same software.
That's a great way to put it.
They both view themselves as isolated, superior cultures surrounded by hostile forces. They both believe that international treaties will never truly guarantee their safety.
And they both rely on extreme self-reliance, deception, and preemptive action to survive.
Which leaves us with a haunting question. Are Iran and Israel locked in this devastating cycle of warfare because their ideologies and religions are fundamentally irreconcilably different? Or are they tearing the Middle East apart because, in their deeply ingrained paranoia and their ruthless pursuit of survival, they are exactly the same?
That is a staggering perspective to walk away with. It completely rewires how you understand the mechanics of power. See you next time with more such stories.